All right, so here we go. Tricia, have at it.
Okay, guys. Well, I really appreciate everybody taking time out of your day to come and spend a little time with me, listening to me talk all about how you can develop a peak performance mindset. Just incidentally, we have a new book coming out called Peak Perform. What is it called? Peak Poker Performance, Jonathan? I think that's what it's called.
Peak poker performance.
And that's a mouthful. And a little bit of this is from the book, but some of it's not. Some of it's actually like brand new. And just by the way, for signing up with us, you are going to get a bonus PDF. And Dan, your tech guy, should be sending that out to everybody. It's a PDF, which is fillable because I used every technological skill that I have at my disposal to make it so you could type into it. And what it is it's going to help you develop a pre-game routine that hopefully is going to put you in the right sort of mental space so that you can go and play your best poker. Having said that, I feel like the mental game is one of the least appreciated and most often overlooked aspects of poker performance because a peak performance or a peak poker mindset or peak performance mindset, that's a lot of P's, guys. It can set you apart and it can help you in a lot of ways. It can improve your performance. It can make studying easier. It can just make everything that you do more effective, and it can enhance your life in so many ways. So I really want to present you guys with a number of different mindsets or beliefs, and I'm going to show you quite a few, at least a dozen in here today. And knowing that I think if you could use all of them, you're just going to be a mindset beast. But you don't have to use all of them. You can pick and choose. So I'm going to try and give you some really good information that you can pick and choose from. So Jonathan is going to be moving the slides, right, Jonathan?
Yes.
Okay, and so I guess right now they're seeing the one about the bonus.
We just move forward to start with a clear vision.
Okay, perfect. That's exactly where we need to be. So this is what I want to start you guys out with. So the first thing you really need to think about is what is it that you want? Because as much as we would all like to be experts and great and wonderful in many things, it's really not possible to excel in a ton of things. So what I would encourage you to do is think about what is your one thing going to be? What is it that you would like your legacy to be? And since you're all here in a poker webinar, I'm assuming that we're talking about your legacy in poker, but it can actually be your legacy in anything. But you really take a Stephen Covey moment. He did the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is still probably a bestseller, even though it's at least 20 years old, maybe older now. But one of his basic tenets was you got to begin with the end in mind. So you have to kind of think about, where do I want to end up with this game? And have a clear vision. There's a really great book, and it happens to be written by an author here in Austin by the name of Gary Keller. And Austin is where I happen to live. And his book is called The One Thing. And he basically spends the whole book talking about how you need to figure out your one thing. And once you discover your one thing, then you execute and you execute and you execute and you execute. And by doing this, you are going to have a much better advantage or a much better chance, if you will, of getting, what you want. Because if you try to do everything, you might end up with nothing. Now, I'm not saying that you can't be, great at a couple, 3 things, but really honestly, what's your one thing? If you break it down to the one thing, it's going to really help you.
I found that something that I do is that I try a lot of things a little bit and then find what works and then really focus on that.
And I think that is a really good thing to do. And actually, we're going to talk later on about becoming anti-fragile. And that is really an important component of being anti-fragile. So you were ahead of the curve, and you might not have even known that.
Awesome.
So let's move on to the next slide, which has some dominoes on it.
We were already there. Okay, go ahead.
Perfect. Absolutely great. The thing with the dominoes, and this is also an idea that comes from this one thing kind of mindset, is that if you set the right things in motion, so those would be your dominoes. So these are all the right things. And we're going to talk a little bit later about how you figure out the right things. And that's actually, as it pertains to poker, that's more Jonathan's area, because he's written, I don't even know how many books now, Jonathan, like a good dozen books, where he is telling you the right things and what you need to know, right?
Correct. Only 10 books.
Only 10. Okay, sorry. Well, I oversold you, but I'm sure that by this time next year, it'll be at least at a dozen. But nonetheless, if you line up your dominoes, the right thing and having the right first domino can topple many things. And that's this domino effect that I want you to think about. And I also want you to think about this. A domino, yes, it can knock over another domino, but it can actually knock over a domino that's 50% larger. So the geometric growth that you can get if you line up your dominoes correctly is explosive. And if you don't believe this, although I don't know why you would, because I only tell you good, believable things. But there's a physicist named Lorne Whitehead. He talked about this, published an article in the American Journal of Physics way back in 1983. But you can actually look on YouTube and you can see a video of this where he wrote about this very concept. And he said, look, if you start out with a 2-inch domino, the 10th domino can be the size of Peyton Manning. And like by the time you get to the 31st domino, it can be the size of like Mount Everest. Okay. So what you want to do, and what I'm talking about here, is stringing your one things together so that you can knock over the first one and then it knocks over the next one. And as it's knocking over these bigger things sequentially over time, this is going to add up to a lot. Now, going back to kind of the one thing and your dominoes, an idea that's really stuck with me is that you don't need a to-do list. What you need is a success list. So on this list, you're going to list out what are the things that are going to take me to wherever it is I want to be. So in poker, what are the things that I need to be doing, whether it's hand reviews, whether it's watching videos, reading books. There's certain things that you need to do, and these are your dominoes. Now, I don't think I wrote it on the slide. I'm pretty sure I didn't, but the Pareto principle, which probably everybody's heard of in one form or another, but it kind of goes along these lines. Basically, the Pareto principle says that 20% of our inputs get us 80% of our outputs. So again, this is the dominoes. Like if we can figure out the important 20% and put all of our attention on that, then look, we're going to get great results. What most of us do is we sort of putter around and we put our focus everywhere. We're here, there, and yonder. We don't have our dominoes lined up. We do a little this, a little of that, and we get nothing. So I want you to really think about what is the one thing that you could start doing today that would have the most positive impact on your poker game, or it could be your life. And if you guys want to type it into chat, go ahead and just let us know. What is the one thing you think you could start doing today that would have the most positive impact on your poker game or your life in general?
Well, Tricia, can you give us some examples? Like, say I am struggling at $1, $2 no limit. What are some good starting places?
Well, I was actually going to say, hey, Jonathan, hit us with your massive amount of knowledge that you have, because I'm sure that in your time of coaching people, you have figured out. So like if somebody's playing 1-2 no limit, and now I have in my mind what I think are some of the most important things. For example, I think that having pre-flop ranges is very important. And I think if you know with certainty what your ranges are from each position, just as kind of a simplified thing, that's going to help you in a variety of ways. Now, if you don't have that, you're just sort of like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll play this hand, maybe I won't. And you make decisions based off of maybe your emotions, right? So to me, that's like an example, but you probably have even better ideas for dominoes.
Well, yeah, I mean, so you can really just study the game extensively, get the best at poker that you possibly can. And the way you do that is by starting somewhere. So, for example, if you've never read a poker book, you should probably read a poker book on the game that you were trying to learn by someone who is great. You could also study using analytical tools. You could hire a coach. I mean, if you have the funds to hire a coach or even attend webinars, kind of like this one and the other ones I've done with Excelling at No Limit Hold'em, that is a very good way to get free coaching. And if you can have people who have already succeeded give you the advice that has helped them and made them get where they are, that's going to be a very good first step.
I agree completely. But, I think what happens with a lot of people is that they will be like, oh, I don't know what to do. There's too many things. Like I could read books, I could watch videos, right? I could do this, that, and the other. And I think that gets them overwhelmed. Do you have like some thoughts about that?
there's definitely an overwhelm issue. I mean, for example, I'm dealing with it right now. I want to watch all the Global Poker League videos, and there's a lot of them. They record, I guess, 24 hours per week or so. That's a lot of poker to watch. And I mean, I recognize I have to play against these people, and it's sort of my job to do my best versus all of them, so it makes it a little bit easier. But I would certainly never tell someone, just sit down and watch all the Global Poker League videos. That's just not feasible. So you want to study maybe videos on specific topics. I mean, I have a lot of training videos on specific concepts, like how to increase your levels of aggression to do better. But I really think if you just sit down and focus on a book that is on the game of your choice, and then maybe watch something like 2 hours of videos on that specific thing each week, that will be, it'll be a very good start to put you in a good direction.
Exactly. So you have to pick something and you have to go deep with it. But I would say what I feel like a lot of people get hung up on is they want to focus on something that's really sexy, like, 5-bet shoving, as a bluff or something. And that's not where most of your money comes from or where most of your effort should go. Most of your effort should go to the things that are going to get you the big payoff. Again, look for the 20% that's going to get you the 80%. So you're going to have to play the big blinds every single round. So, or the big blind, small blind. So you probably want to learn as much as you can about playing the blinds. So that's kind of, an idea. Or, just think about things that you have to do all the time and how can you really dial those in and drill down. And if you can do that, then, you're kind of off on a good path.
Yeah, I definitely think that you want to focus on spots that occur all the time. And for example, you don't need to work on 7-bet bluffing spots, for example, when you're playing $1, $2 no limit, because they legitimately never come up.
Right. And in fact, ABC poker is probably what's going to get you the most money at 1-2 no limit.
Exactly. So focus on what will help you immediately. And that's often going to be enough to help you immediately and give you a solid foundation for later, especially in poker where really just playing good, tight, aggressive is enough to win in the small stakes. And then from there, you can branch out a little bit and really start taking advantage of your opponent's mistakes as you progress.
Exactly. All right. So let's talk about the big U. It's the next slide. So basically, what the big U is, it's an idea that I got from a guy named Todd Henry, but I find it to be very compelling. Every big project, big goal, big idea, whatever, goes through a series of ups and downs. So what the big U is when you're starting on the one side of the big U, you're like all motivated and fired up. You're just getting ready to get started on whatever it is. So it's like maybe right now you're thinking about the World Series of Poker and like you are fired up. And the other side of the U is you're imagining, visualizing yourself, doing really well, or maybe winning a bracelet or a certain amount of money or whatever. And you're fired up and you're like, hell yeah, I'm going to watch as many videos. I'm going to read the books. I'm going to do whatever. Right. But then what happens is it's ups and downs. And so as we're going along, we typically get down in the valley, which is the bottom of that U. And that's where things, they start to get hard, or maybe we're not learning as fast as we want to learn, or, maybe you're going out to your home casino and you're trying out some of the things that you're learning that you want to take, to the World Series, but maybe you're not doing well, you're losing, whatever the case may be. Well, what happens is when we get in the bottom there, we're now in what they call the valley of mediocrity. And what happens to a lot of people is they just get stuck there. This is also kind of a plateau idea because, you can get to a certain level, but then you get stuck. And the reason you get stuck is because you don't realize that you have to keep, working. And then the U inevitably turns back up again towards your goal. So it's ups, downs, ups, downs. All great journeys go through a series of these U's. It's just part of the process. And so you just kind of have to understand, okay, I'm in the middle of the U. I'm stuck in the middle of mediocrity mountain, but I'm not going to get stuck. I'm not going to stay here. I'm going to keep working and understand that it's a process. And the other thing I'd want to say about this is make sure that you're running your own race. You only need to be competing with yourself. A lot of times we feel like, oh, we got to compete with others. And, well, maybe Jonathan did, whatever process he did, and he's gotten these great results, but I've done the same thing and my results are not as good. When I'm comparing myself to him, I'm going to feel really bad about myself. So you only need to be comparing yourself to yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's really easy, especially in poker, to focus on the people who are doing great and ignore the people who are doing poorly. So do not let yourself fall into the trap of thinking, wow, this guy did great, I should feel bad about myself. Because someone's always going to be winning, because someone always wins a poker tournament. And everyone else is always going to be losing. So do not fall in the habit of being jealous or envious or anything like that. That's just going to lead to nothing good. So a lot of people are saying maybe a sine wave is a better metaphor, but even a sine wave is sort of breaks even. Ideally, you'd rather be sine waving your way up to the top, or just progressing straight to the top with no curves, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just want people to know that the process of peak performance is filled with ups and downs. And not even just peak performance, just poker in general, life in general is ups and downs. It's never a straight line. It's never, just up, up, and up. I mean, maybe sometimes it seems like it's that way. I'm thinking of like Fedor Holtz, who we've had on the show a couple times, and he's like a beast who's, like in the last 6 months won $5.5 million. But I'm sure that even Fedor has his ups and downs. So, everybody does. And that's just kind of what careers are like and what life is like. And you just can't get stuck in the middle.
It's really easy, especially when things are going poorly, I feel like, to kind of just stop trying your best.
Exactly.
And really also, whenever you're doing great, it's easy to stop trying to do your best because you feel like, oh, this is easy. And you always have to be working hard. That's what it amounts to.
It really does. And speaking of working hard, I want to show you the next slide because this is like this guy. You want to talk about a sick beast. Now, you guys, I don't know if you know this guy. His name is Karoli Takash. And back in the day, and we're going way back on this one, he was considered the world's #1 shooter. So he's the best shooter. So the year is 1938. He's a sergeant in the Hungarian army, and he is getting ready for the 1940 Olympics. And he is the world's best. Everybody's like, Karoli, what a shot. But then, because he's in the army, he's doing just a routine exercise. And one day he's doing a routine exercise using grenades. And I think you know what happens next. His hand gets blown off, his right hand, his shooting hand. So this is not good. So, of course, he's in the hospital, and he was depressed, according to biographical accounts. For about a month, he's in the hospital and he's depressed, and he's like, my hand's blown off. I can't be a great shooter. I'm not going to get to go to the Olympics, and this really sucks. But then he had a thought, and he thought, you know what? I don't really need my right hand. I still got a left hand, so I can just train myself to shoot with my left hand. So he starts practicing in secret. He doesn't tell anybody. And then in 1939, he shows up to the World Championships, and his friends are really glad to see him from the shooting community. And they think that he's just there to watch. But he's like, no, I'm here to shoot. And so he ends up shooting using his left hand, and he wins. And his friends are like, holy Jesus, this is amazing. Well, he's still thinking like, hey, the Olympics are coming. But by 1940, the Olympics are canceled because of the war. And he still keeps on shooting. But then guess what? The 1944 Olympics canceled. I mean, this guy, he is really taking it hard.
He's running bad. He
is running so bad. But then, you know what? In 1948, finally, they're going to have the Olympics. By this time, he's like 38 years old. He's, by Olympic standards, he's considered like an old man. He shows up to the 1948 Olympics in London, and somebody reportedly asked him, like, hey, what are you doing here? And he said, I'm here to learn. Okay. And he ends up winning the gold medal. And allegedly, the person who asked him what he was doing there was the silver medalist. And allegedly on the podium leaned over and said to him, I think you've learned enough. But he really hadn't learned enough. He came back in 1952 in Helsinki, and he won another gold. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because you might say, well, he didn't give up, but it's more than he didn't give up. It's more the fact that he never let go of the vision that he had for himself. He had a very clear and compelling vision. And so it shows you have to know what you want, and you have to be willing to do whatever it takes. I mean, and obviously this is not your average guy. What do you think, Jonathan?
Definitely not an average guy. I mean, first off, he gets blown up. And then he perseveres and perseveres and perseveres. And that's kind of how it is with poker or anything. If you look at the people at the top, quite often they have had some setbacks, and they just push through them. A lot of time, people who don't make it to the top, they have their setbacks, they get disgruntled, they get depressed, and then they quit. And that's not how you get to the top of anything. To get to the top of anything at all, you must work very hard, much harder than your peers, and sort of devote your life to some extent to getting great at it.
Exactly. And it's just a willingness to say, I'm going to do that. So again, it goes back to the big you. It's like, do you want to just be stuck and mediocre? I mean, he could have easily been like, blew my hand off. I guess that's over. And he could have just quit. But he was like, you know what? That's not what I want for myself. And if this guy can do this, I think we could all probably do most anything we put our minds to. It's just a matter of putting our minds to it. So now that we've had that inspirational tale, let's move on. Now, what I was talking about with Caroli, I mean, that's like the big stuff, right? But you don't have to just be going big all the time. And so, what I'm talking about on this slide is something called marginal gains, if you will. Marginal gains is where you make smart choices, but they can be small, and you're very consistent over time, and that's going to lead you to a radical difference. If I said, hey, do you think that you could find 100 things that you could do 1% better? For example, if I said, could you play your next session of poker 1% better? Do you think you could do it? Could you improve your study by 1%? Could you improve your hand reading by 1%? Whatever. Could you improve, like if you're just getting started with meditating, which I definitely think you guys should all be doing. Could you meditate, 1 minute longer? These are marginal gains. Marginal gains are very tiny and they don't sound like a lot, but when you put them all together, it really adds up and can come out to something tremendous. So when you're thinking about poker, besides the game, you should also be looking at diet, exercise, anything that's a factor around play, and just make yourself a list of like, okay, what are all these things and what could I do to improve by 1%? You can get 1% better and it's not that difficult. But when you add it up, again, it's like an exponential outcome.
Well, I mean, imagine for poker, for example, you decide to start studying 10 minutes per day by listening to, for example, I have a weekly poker hand podcast where it's a 5 or 10 minute podcast where I go through a poker hand. Doesn't take much time at all. You can do it at any point in the day. And I have something like 90 episodes of it, and that will last you for, 3 months, no problem. And if you listen to those 5 minutes per day, every day, for the next 3 months. By 3 months from now, you will have listened to 90 hands, hopefully thought through those situations, and applied that to your game. And that's a pretty easy thing to do. You can also do it with, hour-long poker videos, or decide to watch a webinar per day, assuming you have a lot of time. But baby steps are the way to go. I mean, think about just getting in shape, right? And maybe every day you replace your unhealthy breakfast with a green smoothie, for example. And just do that every day for a year, and you'll be in significantly better shape. So small steps are good.
Tiny habits is what we call it in my business. And it's just like you made like perfect examples because, a lot of times when people think, oh, I need to lose weight, they think, oh, I got to change like everything, right? I got to, throw out all the bad food and I got to exercise an hour a day. And then you get overwhelmed. You're like, I can't do that. But could you take one unhealthy thing off of your plate and replace it, with one healthy thing? Or could you exercise for, do one squat a day? I mean, it can be like ridiculously small, but if you keep doing it, it adds up. And like you said, a year from now, you could be in like amazing shape.
Definitely. I mean, imagine brushing your teeth each day. You brush your teeth for 3 minutes per day or something like that. And if you stop doing that, your teeth will rot out.
Yes.
But if you do it, you'll be fine.
Right. And the thing of it is, like, I think it's kind of a westernized sort of, ideology where we want it all now and we want it fast. But it just doesn't really work that way. The brain doesn't work that way. It's more sequentially over time, taking actions, but they can be very small actions, but very diligently. And that's what's going to get you the radical difference over time. Like right now, how many days out are we from the start of the series? It's like 30, I don't know, something like that, 35 days. Well, you might be thinking, oh my God, I've got to like watch 100 videos and blah, 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 or whatever you think you need to do to prepare. And you're like, that's too much and I can't do it. So maybe you don't do it. You procrastinate. By the time the series gets here, you've done nothing. Wouldn't you have been better off even watching 30 minutes a day between now and then? Of course.
Take your small steps and work hard.
Exactly.
But I mean, I think really a main point of this is to don't overwhelm yourself with infinite things to do. You need to start small and do it. Really, you have to do it.
Just do it. Nike knew what they were talking about, right?
Exactly.
But let's do it with a certain mindset. And that's the next slide. There's a couple of different ways that you can think. And in the Western world, we often think in terms of a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is basically this idea that you're born a certain way, born this way, to quote Lady Gaga. And the idea is that your qualities are kind of carved in stone and that you can't get more. So, like, however smart you are, that's how smart you are. How, talented you are at basketball. Well, people think that Michael Jordan came out of the womb dribbling, for example. And that's just not the case. But before I get into that, if you have a fixed mindset, it's bad for you, because if you think you only have a certain amount of intelligence, or you say mathematical ability, because I hear math ability all the time on people just talk about, like, oh, I'm no good at math or whatever. They think they only have a certain amount of ability. When you think you only have a certain amount, then that's going to engender like a fear of failure, because not, like losing an MTT, you would take that as a sign that you're not good at poker because you have a fixed mindset. If you have this mindset, you better show that you're, very smart or very good or whatever. And failure, you look at it as bad. And it proves to everybody you don't know anything. Versus a growth mindset, which this is an idea that the hand you're dealt is just a starting point. You can change and grow with work and experience. And this is the idea that genius is made. You're not born with it. So you pursue growth for the enjoyment of the learning and the growing, and you're not afraid to make a mistake if you have this kind of mindset. Now, people very much tend to fall into one camp or the other, but you can shift it. Even if you're starting out today with a fixed mindset and you think, oh, I'm no good at math, you can change that to a growth mindset. It takes some effort because you're used to thinking a certain way, but if you put in that effort, you can definitely grow and change. And I already mentioned, Michael Jordan didn't come out of the womb dribbling. Ben Hogan, one of the greatest golfers of all time, if you don't know who he is, kind of look him up. He was considered uncoordinated as a child, and he became one of the greatest golfers of all time. And golf books always talk about Ben Hogan. Mozart composed so much that his hands were deformed. Charles Darwin, who did Theory of Evolution, he was studying, animals. Like when he was a kid, he was like, getting them and cataloging them and all this stuff. And it was like his whole life. And basically these guys, I know it's all guys, they're women too. Okay. I'm not trying to leave the ladies out, but a lot of sporting examples kind of do come from the guys, but they seek out the challenge and then they thrive on this. And I'm actually going to have more to say about that in a little bit. But if you don't want to listen to all this, just go to the greatest basketball coach of all time, John Wooden, college basketball anyway. He said the elite performer focuses on his strengths and then focuses on his weaknesses, because he's going to make it a point to focus on how he can improve or grow. And by the way, she could also make it a point to focus on how she can improve and grow. So you can't just always be looking at, oh, I don't have this, I don't have that. You need to change that mindset to, how can I get it? Genius is made. It's not like inborn. I mean, yeah, for like what, 1/10 of 1% of people, maybe they're born with something, but everybody else is working hard and diligently and making it happen. And Jonathan, you've been around the poker world a long time. You've probably seen this.
Well, I know that whenever I first started playing poker, I was horrible at it. I was a weak, tight player. I did not put a chip into the pot unless I had a good hand, because I was scared of losing my money. And eventually I decided I wanted to try to figure out how to win. I picked up some books, I studied, and after a little while, I got better than the players in my game. And it sort of progressed like that, where I was always trying to learn how to beat the game I was in and progress to where I am today. And if you look at a lot of the top players, most of them are not natural geniuses. A lot of them just worked really hard and studied the game a ton away from the table. And I mean, perhaps these players' skills is that they recognize that they must study to get good. That is a skill to some extent.
Yes.
And they are good, hard workers. I mean, I'm a hard worker, and very few of the players who just kind of lackadaisically show up and play last. Some people are naturally gifted at the game, and they're typically very, very good, but often they have leaks away from the table, or they seem to not stick around very long if they are the sort of lackadaisical type. Most of the people who are at the very top just study hard. I mean, a lot of them enjoy playing games. A lot of them enjoy improving themselves, and that's how they do it.
Exactly. Somebody was saying in the chat that Michael Jordan got cut from the high school team, and that's absolutely true. And he worked and he worked and he worked. I mean, and if you read about like LeBron James or Kobe Bryant, those types of guys, you're going to see that they have an incredible work ethic. It looks like they're gifted geniuses because you don't see everything that happens behind the scenes. But if you did see it, you would know that they definitely got a growth mindset, and you can cultivate that for yourself too. It takes a certain level of confidence, but it's just like for you, when you at some point you had to realize you were this weak type player, and then you had to have confidence that you could stop doing that you could figure it out or do what it takes. But then once you did that, boom, look at you now.
Yeah, I mean, I decided I didn't like losing my money. And so I was willing to pay a little bit to get a book and try to see if it could teach me why I was losing my money. And sure enough, it did. And I improved from there. And I realized soon enough that I liked winning way better than I like losing. So you got to work hard and study if you want to get good, unless you're one of the natural geniuses. And if you're like me, you're just not one. You have to work hard.
But somebody's typing that Stu Unger was a poker genius, and I think if you read material about his life, yes, he was a genius at games in general. Jim Rummy was also, he was very much gifted. But to your point, he had all these leaks away from the table, so then he ends up dead in a motel room with like $30 in his pocket, and that's it. Even though he had a lot of talent and gifts, but it didn't work out. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think Stu's actually a really good example of what you probably don't want to be.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people think, oh, he's the greatest poker player, but you don't want to be just a great poker player. You want to be at least okay at life.
Yeah, it's really pretty interesting because I'm pretty sure it's where I talk about that is in the paid webinar. But if you want to be a great poker player, you have to be a good person. Like it takes, being disciplined. It takes being of good character, let's just put it that way. So that's Perfect. A whole nother ball of wax.
Let me actually pause our video. Hello everyone, I am Jonathan Little. I hope you're enjoying this Thanksgiving Day marathon. Let me take a second to tell you about my Excelling at No Limit Hold'em webinars. I wrote the book, Excelling at No Limit Hold'em, 2 or 3 years ago, where I essentially found the best players in the world at their specific area of expertise, right? So for example, for Heads Up No Limit Hold'em, I got Olivier Bousquet, who just absolutely crushes Heads Up No Limit Hold'em. I had Phil Hellmuth write about the strategies he uses with a short stack that have somehow allowed him to continuously make deep runs and win more bracelets than anyone else. We have a few chapters by myself. One is on final tables. I've had great final table results. And we also have some mindset experts who have written on their specific areas of expertise. So, what I did after that is I had them make webinars on either similar topics to what their chapter was on or other areas that they are experts in. So, we have content from Phil Hellmuth, Dr. Tricia Cardner, Mike Sexton, Alex Fitzgerald, Elliot Rowe, Olivier Bousquet, Scott Clements, and lots more. So, normally, we sold these for $100 when they were first released. But for today, for Black Friday, they will be $15 each. I want to make sure that you can learn about the specific topics you want from the pros you want, which is why I work with all these pros that I do work with, right? It's important to play well with others. You see a lot of people in the poker community trying to cause trouble, but I think love wins at the end of the day. And working together with other people who want to better the poker community is going to take us all very far. So check that out right now at pokercoaching.com/Black Friday. Find the material you need to take your game to the next level, and let's all prosper together.